Hi everybody, this is a VR to Pipes etc. and his 300 sub GAW. I'm smoking my Dr. Plum, and in it I've got some Rattray's Accountant's mixture from 1963. First of all, I want to sort of say, how much I enjoy your channel. I wish I could say I've watched every one of your videos, and I haven't. But I wanted to take part in this GAW because I thought the questions you had were incredible. You ask what worries us most about the future, or what worries me most about the future. And I guess the real worry I have at the moment is the Brexit decision, whatever that comes to when they finally get it sorted out. But the idea of leaving Europe, it's got a real mess politically. Parliament's totally divided on it. The government hasn't got a cat in hell's chance of getting it through. So it's going to go down. Then we either have a choice of delaying things, of staying in Europe, or of just crashing out with no agreements, which would be an absolute disaster. At the moment, the government's trying to stockpile medicine and food and has enough for 6 weeks. That's what they've stockpiled, and that just isn't going to be enough. So people who are on regular medicines like myself, like Carolyn, and like many, many others, could be in real trouble. Carolyn's on morphine. That's going to be hell if she can't get that. Her pain's going to be terrible, but the withdrawal's going to be even worse. I'm on a massive dose of an antidepressant, which you mustn't stop all at once. To cold turkey it is horrific. I've run out of tablets once, and what happens, you get like, your brain fries, you get like electric fizzes in your brain. Nobody who hasn't sort of suffered those can know what it's like. But it is literally like a sort of inside your head. Not very pleasant. But it's not just the tablets and the food, it's the mess of the thing. I would like to remain in Europe, in the EU, for a very simple reason. After the war, the countries of Europe needed to find a way that war in Europe would never happen again. And historic enemies decided the best thing would be to join together in a European Union, that they would do as much as they could together, that they would make decisions together, that they would run things together. And because of our political system and the way things were at the time, we weren't members of that. We didn't join. In fact, they wouldn't have us. But later on, the opportunity came, and the country took a vote to join. But we didn't take part in the European currency, and we kept some of the things that other people had agreed to ourselves. So we'd already got quite a lot of protection from a lot that goes on in Europe. But over the years, the newspapers ridiculed Europe. They talked about silly laws like straight bananas and that kind of thing, which were all lies. But a lot of people believed it. It was in the paper, so it must be true. And gradually disillusionment set in within a fair group of people. And they decided to have a referendum. The referendum itself, there weren't many people who voted, but it was fairly evenly split, although the exiting people actually won it by a few votes. But most of the country didn't take part in the vote. For a start, I think most people thought that it would never take place, that it would never take place and it wouldn't be of any effect because it was only an advisory vote. But then the Prime Minister at the time said that it was no longer advisory, that it was a permanent thing, that we had to do it. And he resigned and buggered off. And we got the present Conservative government. Nobody elected the present Prime Minister. She just was voted in by the party to take over when the other guy left. And she's really loused up the negotiations. The negotiations that she's come up with are worse than being fully in Europe, because she's submitted to a lot of the rules without having any say in them anymore. You know, once we leave under those rules, we can't put our own input in. We have to accept what's being put before us. And a lot of the political decisions have been, to say the least, immoral, and to have gone against parliamentary tradition. For example, they said that Parliament could discuss it for 5 days and then vote on the agreement. But after 3 days, when she realised that nobody was going to vote for this bloody thing, she said that they couldn't vote and that she was going back to renegotiate. Anyway, I'm going to stop that there because I could go on for hours about it, but that's one of my very, very big fears. There is another one, and that's global warming. Whether you believe in global warming or not, the fact is that temperatures are rising and having an effect around the world. Doesn't really matter whether it's global warming caused by mankind. It doesn't matter if it's a cyclical warming, because we have to do something about it. We have to reduce our carbon footprint. It's reckoned that at the most, we've got something like 12 years to 20 years to make things better. And the various countries, or a lot of the countries, just aren't doing it. They're not trying to reduce carbon output. And that's going to be something that won't affect me, because I'm coming up to my 70s. I'll probably be dead by the time the main effects are felt. But people like my children and my grandchildren are going to be on the receiving end of it. We know the seas are rising. We know the ice caps are melting. We know what effect that will have. You know, there are very, very, very few scientists. I only know of one, really, who doesn't agree that it's global warming. The majority believe it is, and that's going to have a big effect. So those are the two things. But the second question you ask is, what legacy do you want to leave? And again, that's a difficult one, because I know I can't leave money or property because we haven't got any. But I don't particularly want to. I think the legacy I'd like to leave is that despite all the difficulties in my life, despite all the early setbacks and troubles that I've been in, despite not being a very nice person in my younger days, I'd like to feel that when I die, people will remember me as a decent bloke, somebody who cared about people, cared about things, somebody who was honest and had integrity. And I've tried always to follow and keep my integrity. That's why I left the church, because I could no longer believe in God. I could have just kept my head down. It doesn't make any difference to anybody. I'm retired. But I haven't. I've said, no, this is the situation I'm in. I leave. And I'd like people at least to think that I had integrity, that I shew love, and that I was a gentleman, whatever that means. I'd like my children to feel that, whilst not the best kind of father, that at least I was an adequate father, that I treated them with respect as far as I could. I'd like my friends to miss me, what few I've got. But yeah, I think that's the kind of legacy I'd like to leave. And I hope that possibly somebody might consider my life worth taking little bits from. And the other question you asked, what are the top 3 adventures remaining on your bucket list? Well, virtually everything's remaining on my bucket list, because with Carolyn being ill, I find it difficult to get away to do the things on my bucket list. At the top of my list would be to see a volcano erupting and be fairly close to it. Somewhere like Honolulu or Iceland or wherever there's a volcano going. I would just love that. I know it's dangerous, I know it's foolish, but I just think that is such a force of nature that it's something I would never forget. Certainly if I got hit by a bloody molten rock, I'd never forget it. But anyway, another on my bucket list would be to visit Istanbul, Constantinople, to visit Santa Sofia, to the Topkapi Palace, and some of the other places. It's somewhere that I consider one of the great places of history. And whilst I was there, I might as well buy a meerschaum pipe, So that's 2 things on my bucket list. Another one, the third one, I think, would be to visit Gettysburg. Having been a Freemason and now being unattached, in other words, I don't take part in Freemasonry anymore. I'm still considered a Freemason. I always will be. And I'll always give thanks for what it's given me and taught me. But I'd love to visit Gettysburg because so many of the generals during the Civil War were Freemasons on both sides. And at Gettysburg you had one of the greatest sort of Masonic friendships that there was. That between Hancock and Armistead, Lowe. They spent the night before they split up, a whole group of soldiers spent the night at Hancock's house with his wife, having a party, during which Armistead put his arms around Hancock and said, "May I never raise my gun against you. May I never cause you harm." And they fought in battles all through the Civil War until it came to Gettysburg. They'd never been in the same battle. And then Armistead was faced with knowing that his dearest friend, General Hancock, was just on the top of the hill. It was suggested to him that if he wanted to, he should visit under a white flag, but he couldn't do that. And it was suggested that he didn't take part in the battle, but he knew that wouldn't be right either. So he made that long, painful march, leading his men. At one point, his battered hat on his sword, and went up the hill, eventually suffering a terrible wound. As he fell, he gave a Masonic sign of distress, and somebody from the Union Army came to him and said, "Is there anything I can do to help you, sir?" And he asked whether the soldier could give a message to General Hancock, saying how very sorry Armistead was. And the soldier said, "I'm sorry, sir. The general's shot. He's down." And that must have been the most terrible time for Armistead. Actually, General Hancock survived, but Armistead died, unfortunately. And they do have a friendship monument at Gettysburg, and I would dearly love to see that. I've gone on far too long. I've tried to be honest about the worries and about the legacy and about the bucket list. So I hope it's good enough for you. And I want to wish you all the best for the future for your channel. May your numbers grow and your channel grow in success.